This morning, after wrapping up a project meeting with business partners, I happened to see Victoria Ashworth, my supposedly loving wife, at the Dior boutique. She was purchasing the very custom suit I had pre-ordered long ago. Tonight, however, that suit appeared on her male assistant. I didn't confront her. Instead, I smiled, a knowing look on my face. I arranged for every identical Dior suit from every store in the city to be brought over and piled them high in front of her. Let her buy as many as she desired. My good friend Harry Miller even drafted divorce papers for me overnight. I'm sincere, sterling wealthy, good-looking, and capable. Women are the last thing I lack at the annual company gala. I held a glass of red wine, mingling easily with the executives from our regional branches. As the music swelled and the dance floor gradually filled, Victoria finally arrived, fashionably late, with her male assistant Ethan Shaw in tow. I watched, my own eyes seeing her adjust the Dior lapel pin on Ethan's suit jacket right there at the entrance. A faint smile played on her lips, her eyes full of indulgent satisfaction with her handiwork. Victoria always had a keen eye. Her touch instantly elevated Ethan's entire presence, making him almost worthy of the designer suit he wore. In that instant, any lingering hope I harbored shattered. When I saw Victoria leaving the boutique this morning, I'd foolishly assumed she was picking up the suit for me. My heart had filled with happiness. I even had my stylist give me a haircut specifically to match the suit, but right up until the gala began, she hadn't brought it home. I'd specifically called her earlier, probing gently, asking if she had something for me. She brushed me off, claiming she was busy with work, but through the line, I caught a faint, timid male voice. "Ms. Ashworth, will Mr. Sterling be upset if he finds out?" "Oh, don't worry," Victoria had replied coolly. "He has enough clothes to open his own showroom." Suddenly I understood. The woman I married wasn't so pure anymore. Ethan trailed dutifully behind Victoria, offering me a polite smile. His eyes and the small teardrop mole beneath one corner seemed unnervingly familiar. "Mr. Sterling, good evening. Congratulations on being named the city's most accomplished young entrepreneur of the year." Ignoring the compliment, my gaze turned cold. I looked him up and down, scrutinizing him. "That's a nice suit," I remarked casually. "It's identical to the Dior one I ordered. We're all intelligent people here. Things don't need to be spelled out explicitly. A fresh graduate, barely a year out of university like Ethan, couldn't possibly afford a designer suit costing nearly $20,000. My stare made Ethan visibly uncomfortable, like he was sitting on pins and needles. He bit his lip, darting nervous glances towards Victoria. Victoria met my gaze, her expression as placid and composed as ever. "Sincere," she said smoothly. "Don't misunderstand. Ethan mentioned he'd never attended such a grand event or worn high-end clothing before. Seeing how hard he works and how motivated he is, I simply picked up a suit for him." I raised an eyebrow, nodded slightly, and subtly signaled my own assistant nearby. The next moment, a line of 13 impeccably dressed Dior sales associates marched into the grand hall. Each carried an identical suit, smiling professionally as they approached Victoria. Victoria looked at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. I leaned against a nearby carved pillar, arms crossed, a playful smirk touching my lips. "Time to pay the bill," I announced loud enough for those nearby to hear. "There are 13 executives here tonight, all accompanied by their assistants, every single one hard-working and motivated. Surely, Ms. Ashworth, you wouldn't play favorites and only spoil your own assistant?" Ethan knew I was putting them both on the spot, deliberately embarrassing them. The color drained instantly from his face, leaving him looking shamed and deeply wronged. "Mr. Sterling," he stammered, "please don't make things difficult for Ms. Ashworth. It's all my fault. I'll return the suit immediately." Listen to him. As if I were the unreasonable one, unjustly tearing apart some budding romance. "Ethan Shaw, is it?" I said coolly. "You're overthinking things. 13 suits hardly constitute a difficulty." My eyes flickered to Victoria, then back to him. The Victoria was coddled growing up. She even had someone debone her fish. It's understandable if she doesn't fully grasp the implications of a woman gifting clothes to a man. But you, as her private assistant, should possess more awareness of social boundaries, shouldn't you? Didn't you know better? Ethan lowered his head in panic, stammering apologies. Victoria Ashworth possessed exceptional looks, an impeccable background, and remarkable career success. She was brilliant, living the first half of her life like a dazzling, untouchable star. Countless men had admired her from afar. Over the years, she'd always maintained her characteristic aloofness and independence. Men who attempted to get close usually encountered only her cold, distant gaze. She used to curl up in my arms on countless nights, whispering softly that I was the one she treasured above all else. But now, everything had irrevocably changed. In her eyes, I saw it clearly concern, even pity, directed towards another man. Victoria shook her head with a faint, resigned smile. She retrieved a black card from her purse and handed it to the lead sales associate. Then, she walked slowly over to me, put her arm around my waist and looked deeply into my eyes. Under the cover of the music, her pleasant voice murmured in my ear, "It's just a suit, Sincere. I didn't realize you'd take it so seriously. Scaring the newcomer is one thing, but I'd hate for you to get worked up and upset yourself." Her tone was light, almost playful, as if discussing some trivial matter, effortlessly shifting the focus away from Ethan. A cold sneer touched my lips. My hand, fingers long and defined, gently cupped the back of her head, pulling her incrementally closer. "Ethan Shaw has feelings for you," I stated quietly. "You're far too intelligent not to see it." My voice dropped lower. "I know the cost isn't the issue for you. What happened today is the first time. I expect it to be the last." The surrounding employees, mistaking our intense proximity for flirtation, erupted in good-natured cheers and whistles. Nose to nose, Victoria's face flushed a deep red. Her usual composed expression finally showed a visible crack. She frowned uncomfortably. "Sincere, don't be like this," she hissed quietly. "But what will the staff think?" She added firmly, "Ethan and I have a purely professional relationship, nothing more. Don't let your imagination run wild." I snorted softly and released her. Humiliating her publicly was easy, but it wouldn't reflect well on me either. Engaging in a rivalry with such a watered-down boy was decidedly beneath my station. I'd made my point. I decided to let them off the hook for now. Besides, I had no concrete proof of anything truly inappropriate between them. Taking her hand, I led her towards the stage to deliver the annual summary of our company's impressive achievements. The executive's assistants, sharp cookies all of them, gleefully accepted their unexpected new suits, making sure to parade pointedly past Ethan on their way back. "We owe you one, Assistant Shaw," one called out jovially. "And if it weren't for you, us guys might never have gotten to wear suits this expensive in our lifetimes." Another chimed in, voice laced with insinuation. "To someone like Ms. Ashworth, giving a suit is probably like you giving a child a piece of candy. You wouldn't get any inappropriate ideas about her just because of a small gift, would you?" a third added, looking him up and down. "Assistant Shaw, your eyes. And that little mole. Quite the resemblance. No wonder Ms. Ashworth seems to favor you." Every one of them wore a mocking expression, their words dripping with warning. Ethan had likely never experienced such public humiliation. His head drooped lower and lower, consumed by shame. He waited until the crowd dispersed before running out of the hall, eyes red-rimmed. He didn't return before the gala concluded. After dinner, Victoria and I tactfully made an early exit, allowing the younger employees to truly relax and enjoy the remainder of their night. I'd been drinking, so Victoria drove us home. Victoria was a control freak when it came to her car. Only she ever drove it. As soon as I settled into the passenger seat, I noticed something was wrong. The seat position, my usual setting, had been adjusted, and stuck firmly to the corners of the sun visor were several stickers depicting fierce-looking anime warriors. Besides me, Absolutely no one dared to treat Victoria Ashworth like a chauffeur, and certainly no one was clueless enough to presume to sit in the front passenger seat of her car. It didn't require a genius to deduce who had been sitting there. A sudden, inexplicable rage flared hot within me. I hate to admit it, but at that moment I felt intensely provoked, my scalp tingling, all rationality deserting me. Even when I discovered Victoria had given my pre-ordered suit to Ethan, I'd primarily felt a sense of loss for the suit itself. But this finding his mark left deliberately within my private space, my designated seat in her car, this felt like a blatant, calculated provocation. In 5 years of marriage, I had never felt anger like this. For a fleeting, visceral moment, I wanted to slap Victoria across the face, kick her out of the car, drive straight to wherever Ethan was, and punch him squarely. Twice. Just as I was about to open my mouth and demand an explanation, her phone rang. Completely oblivious to my barely contained fury, Victoria calmly answered Ethan's call. I started irritably readjusting my seat, only catching her side of the conversation. "Okay, don't worry. I'll be right there." My hand paused mid-adjustment. I slowly looked up at her. Victoria frowned slightly. "Ethan's trying to return that suit at the boutique, but he doesn't have the receipt. I need to go over there." She glanced at me. "Unsincere, I'll call the driver to come pick you up. You go on home first." I stared at her, incredulous. "You're going to abandon me here, on the side of the road? For something so trivial," I added pointedly, "and I'm drunk." "Sincere, please don't make this difficult," Victoria pleaded, a hint of exasperation in her voice. "The boy's pride is severely wounded. After what you pulled tonight, he apparently cried until his voice was hoarse. He just wants to return the suit now. Is his pride truly wounded? Or is he deliberately provoking me right under your nose?" I shot back. "Can't he simply come and get the receipt himself?" Victoria closed her eyes with a weary sigh. When she opened them again, they were filled with an unfamiliar coldness. "Sincere, is there really any point in harassing a newcomer like this?" she asked cuttingly. "When did you learn to throw your weight around, abusing your position? You weren't like this before." The white-hot anger I'd felt just moments ago instantly evaporated, replaced by a wave of profound, boundless disappointment. Suddenly, the entire situation struck me as utterly laughable. "And me? Throwing my weight around?" I echoed bitterly. "Victoria, in all our time together, you have never defended another man in front of me, not even your own father. This is a first." A flicker of incomprehension crossed Victoria's cold features. "When we got married," I reminded her sharply, "when we made an agreement. For the sake of the Ashworth and Sterling family reputations, you wouldn't entertain potential suitors and I wouldn't frequent nightclubs. Are you seriously planning to break that fundamental rule for him?" Victoria's gaze remained cool and resolute. After a long moment of internal deliberation, she proceeded to dial the number for the family driver. Finally, she leaned over, unbuckled my seatbelt, and spoke in a calm, detached tone. "Sincere, you're always so sharp, so assertive. We're husband and wife, remember? Not just strategic business partners. Stop applying your boardroom tactics to our relationship. It makes me feel suffocated." She paused. "After I deal with Ethan's situation, I'm going to stay at my parents' old house tonight. I think we both need some time to cool down." So, that was it. She couldn't wait to find relaxation and perhaps something more illicit with another man. Yet, ironically, she used to claim she admired precisely that aspect of my personality. My drive, my decisiveness, my willingness to tackle challenges head-on. Tired of me, bored with me, that's all it boiled down to. Why concoct such a high-minded excuse and attempt to pin the blame squarely on my shoulders? I took the hint and got out of the car without another word, watching the red Porsche accelerate smoothly down the road and disappear from sight. I gave her a chance. She didn't value it. Picking up my phone, I dialed my good friend. "Sorry, Harry," I said grimly. draw up divorce papers for me, unless absolutely necessary. I hadn't wanted to divorce Victoria. The Ashworths and the Sterlings were old family friends. Our families had known each other for generations. Victoria and I were childhood sweethearts, more or less, though she had gone abroad to study for about 10 years, during which time we had lost contact. We reconnected at a banquet specifically arranged by our families to explore the possibility of a marital union. She was still as poised and beautiful as I remembered from childhood, handling the elders' probing questions with remarkable ease and confidence. Meanwhile, my life, apart from managing the Sterling Corporation, had involved its fair share of unwinding in nightclubs to cope with the pressure. I had anticipated a degree of distance and awkwardness between us after so many years apart. Surprisingly, when we were alone, I discovered that beneath her elegant and composed exterior lay a witty and humorous soul. That old, familiar connection from our youth instantly resurfaced. We were both ambitious, focused on advancing our careers, and mutually admired each other's drive. We quickly became engaged and subsequently married. Post-marriage, we strategically cross-held shares in each other's companies, leading to an unprecedented and highly successful merger of the Ashworth and Sterling corporations. Consequently, dividing our entangled assets upon divorce would be an exceedingly complex and potentially messy affair. Back at my villa, my head was pounding fiercely. After showering, I drank a glass of warm milk and prepared for bed. My phone pinged. It was a good night message from Victoria, complete with a kissing face emoji. Even in the midst of our Cold War, she meticulously performed the expected courtesies. The next morning, as I headed to work, I was nearly knocked over by a young woman with striking blue hair just outside the entrance to the Sterling Corporation building. My Stefano Ricci briefcase tumbled to the ground, scraping off a small patch of expensive leather. The breakfast coffee she was holding flew in an arc, splashing onto the hem of my overcoat. The two security guards stationed at the entrance saw the commotion and immediately ran over, loudly scolding the girl for not watching where she was going. Startled and panicked, the girl scrambled to pick up my briefcase, handed it back to me, and frantically pulled out tissues, trying in vain to wipe the coffee stain off my coat. Seeing her efforts were futile, she desperately knelt on the cold pavement, begging for my forgiveness. It was the middle of winter, yet she wore only a thin jacket and large sunglasses, which didn't entirely conceal the faint bruising beneath her eyes. Ignoring the stained coat, I frowned, concerned only with tenderly examining the scuffed leather on my precious briefcase. As fate would have it, this entire scene was witnessed by Victoria, who habitually arrived at her office building across the street around the same time as me. She stood silently on the opposite sidewalk, watching the interaction, her face stern and unreadable, yet radiating cold disapproval. For the first time, I detected a flicker of genuine disgust in her eyes. Perhaps, from her perspective, my lofty posture as I inspected my damaged briefcase while the girl knelt appeared as yet another instance of me throwing my weight around. I ignored her silent judgment, stepped back slightly, gestured for the approaching security guards to hold back, and grasped the girl's arm, pulling her gently but firmly back to her feet. "I don't know what difficulties you're facing," I said, my voice softer than before, "but a young woman needs to value herself more. You can lose almost anything, but never lose your self-respect. That's the one thing that truly belongs only to you." The girl hastily gathered the dropped items and trash from the ground, stammering apologies mixed with thank yous. Then she scurried away nervously. As she rounded the corner of the building, however, she glanced back sharply over her shoulder, a strange, unreadable smirk playing on her lips. Back in my office, sitting behind my large desk, I carefully examined the damaged briefcase again. The scuff itself wasn't large, one wouldn't even notice it without close inspection. But once a flaw appears, no matter how small, the item is no longer perfect. Because it was exceptionally valuable, repairing even such a seemingly insignificant blemish would be incredibly difficult, bordering on impossible. Even harder to repair, I reflected grimly, was the fractured relationship between Victoria and me. The look she had given me that morning still felt like a sharp thorn lodged deep in my heart. Our lunches were traditionally prepared by the Ashworth family's kitchen staff and delivered directly to my office. This arrangement had been Victoria's idea, a subtle way to assert her status as Mrs. Sterling and deter any potential female admirers within my company. Today at noon, I waited until 1 o'clock, having concluded she probably wouldn't show up. Just as I opened the lunch container, she arrived. Ethan Shaw trailed silently behind her. His eyes were conspicuously red and swollen. He kept his head bowed, attempting to look respectful, pitiable, and utterly miserable. I put down my chopsticks and simply watched them, waiting. Victoria sat down beside me and let out a weary sigh. Because of what happened at the gala, she began without preamble, Ethan is being targeted and ostracized at the company. I picked up the soup spoon and calmly ladled some soup into a bowl for Victoria, keeping my eyes downcast. "Oh," I murmured dismissively. "He's the CEO's executive assistant, isn't he? Surely he can handle such minor workplace issues." "A night she was hoping," Victoria said, her voice tight, "that you would control your people, tell them to stop picking on a newcomer. Due to certain unspoken but accepted business practices, we each had strategically placed personnel within the other's corporation." Victoria was clearly implying that my loyalists were targeting Ethan out of misplaced allegiance to me. The gala had been a joint event for both corporations. Nearly all employees from both sides had been present. In such large organizations, gossip and intrigue flourish. It was inevitable that Ethan's questionable behavior would attract negative attention and criticism. I carefully placed the soup bowl in front of her. "First," I stated calmly but firmly, "I haven't instructed anyone, implicitly or explicitly, to target or exclude your assistant. You should know by now that such petty tactics are neither my style nor my method." I met her gaze directly. "Second, his current predicament is entirely of his own, making a direct consequence of his blatant lack of boundaries and professional discretion." I paused, letting my words sink in. "Victoria, you still don't understand human nature sufficiently. Your exceptional, unwarranted indulgence and tolerance towards him will only continue to create more enemies for him, one after another. Believe me, I am not the one harming him." Ethan, who had been standing silently by, suddenly stepped forward, his voice urgent. "It has nothing to do with Miss Ashworth," he interjected quickly. He turned to me, bowing slightly. "Mr. Sterling, the incident at the gala was indeed my oversight. Receiving such an expensive gift for the first time, I got carried away with excitement and inadvertently offended you. I sincerely apologize." I paused, then let out a short, humorless chuckle. "Victoria," I remarked dryly, "your assistant is quite an interesting character. He doesn't seem capable of understanding plain English, yet he's fiercely protective of you." I did not accept Ethan's clearly insincere apology, nor did I make any move to intervene or call off my people who might have been giving him a hard time. Ethan's display of distress and his tear-filled eyes seemed to finally snap something within Victoria. For the first time since I'd known her, she completely lost control of her emotions. She screamed my name, then violently smashed the soup bowl I had just given her onto the floor at my feet. Incredibly, she then demanded that I apologize to Ethan. Apologize for what? I had done absolutely nothing wrong that day. Victoria and I parted on unequivocally bad terms. That very afternoon, she took Ethan Shaw with her on an extended business trip, effectively removing him from the contentious environment of the office. That evening, while having drinks with Harry, he grumbled that I was being too shrewd, too calculating. He argued that my actions had only succeeded in provoking Victoria's latent protective instincts towards Ethan. Ridiculous. Hadn't I faced countless temptations from attractive women over the years? I could maintain my principles steadfastly year after year. Why couldn't she demonstrate the same self-control? Ultimately, it boiled down to one simple truth. The love was gone, and I have no desire for things that don't truly belong to me. and even dropped by the Ashworth Corporation today to get a look at this famous assistant myself," Harry continued, swirling his drink. "Tisk tisk, you know. At first glance, he's practically a spitting image of a younger, sincere Sterling." He leaned closer, especially his eyes, and that distinctive mole beneath one. "The resemblance to you is uncanny." He shook his head. "I honestly don't get what Victoria is thinking. Ignoring the authentic article right in front of her to coddle some cheap imitation. Does she actually love you, or has she completely lost her mind?" Harry's words hit me with the force of a physical blow, instantly sobering me up. No wonder I had felt that strange, foggy sense of familiarity upon first meeting Ethan. Then I scoffed bitterly. "Who knows?" I muttered cynically. "Maybe the imposter is gentler, more considerate, more adept at understanding her needs." My head was throbbing intensely. Harry ended up driving me home, and the divorce papers are drafted and ready, he informed me as we pulled up. "When are you planning to actually present them to Victoria?" "Mid-month," I replied decisively. "She'll definitely be back in town by then. She never misses the monthly dinner with her old man. Every mid-month, without fail, we had an unbreakable tradition of visiting the Ashworth family home for a simple dinner with her parents, Arthur and Eleanor. Divorcing Victoria Ashworth was no trivial matter. The intricate web of our personal and professional lives meant I needed this intervening time to meticulously secure all my options and prepare thoroughly for the inevitable fallout. During these days, Ethan Shaw wasn't exactly idle either. He seemed determined to rub salt in the wound, updating his social media feed multiple times a day with curated glimpses of his trip with Victoria. Posts featured them having breakfast together, working late into the night side by side, standing atop the city's grandest skyscraper, surveying the panorama below. There were pictures documenting his firsts, his first time skydiving, his first time experiencing the vibrant underwater world through scuba diving, his first time witnessing the ethereal beauty of the aurora borealis. The novel experiences and sheer excitement this business trip afforded him were clearly things far beyond his wildest dreams or independent means. His giddy joy practically overflowed the confines of his social media profile. It used to be only me accompanying Victoria on such excursions and adventures. Now, the way my own colleagues looked at me was tinged with cautious sympathy and poorly concealed pity. Victoria, by her silence, tacitly allowed Ethan to employ this passive-aggressive method to provoke and wound me. Truly ruthless, cutting deep to the core, utterly heartless and calculating. These past few days, Harry had practically become my shadow, eating and sometimes even staying over at my villa, assisting my legal team in the complex and painstaking process of disentangling my finances from Victoria's. Today, he burst into my office, clutching a plain manila file envelope, his face contorted with fury. "Sincere," he spat out. "Sis, Victoria has really crossed the line this time. It's outrageous. I was in the middle of signing an important business document." I looked up slowly, noting Harry seemed moments away from exploding. "What is it now?" I asked tiredly. "Is she back?" Harry slammed the envelope down hard onto my polished mahogany desk. A small memory card and several glossy photographs slid out. The photos depicted Victoria and Ethan together in what appeared to be a hotel suite, their poses alarmingly intimate. In several shots, Ethan was bare-chested, revealing a cluster of glaringly obvious hickeys prominently displayed on his chest and neck. "She's not back," Harry snarled, "but these compromising photos certainly are." My shoulders, usually held ramrod straight, slumped almost imperceptibly. My chest tightened, a sharp ache constricting my heart. With fingers that trembled slightly, I picked up the memory card and inserted it into the spare laptop on my credenza. The screen flickered to life, displaying a video. The setting was a hotel rooftop terrace at dusk. Victoria stood on her tiptoes, gently cupping Ethan's face in her hands, gazing up at him with an expression bordering on obsessive adoration. Behind them, the sky was a breathtaking canvas of fiery orange hues painted by the setting sun. The twilight glowed. The two figures embraced. It looked like a poignant romantic painting unfurling across the horizon. Just as their lips were about to meet, I decisively slapped the laptop shut. My own voice trembled slightly, betraying my inner turmoil. "Who sent this?" "Sainty arrived by courier," Harry replied grimly. The front desk downstairs received the package. I took a deep, deliberate breath, then slowly exhaled, forcing myself to regain control. Meticulously, I gathered the photos, placed them back into the envelope along with the memory card, secured the envelope in a locked drawer of my desk, and finally managed to restore a semblance of outward calm. "Keep this absolutely quiet," I instructed Harry, my voice low and steady now. "Find out precisely who sent that package." "Who else could it possibly be?" Harry scoffed indignantly. "It has to be that shameless Ethan Shaw, obviously desperate to force your hand and climb the corporate ladder by any means necessary." The angle of the video footage seemed more like candid, surreptitious filming rather than something deliberately staged, I noted internally. Whatever. Ultimately, it didn't matter who sent it or why. What mattered was the undeniable truth. Victoria Ashworth was truly tainted this time. Tomorrow was the mid-month mark. It was high time for all this sordid, rotten business to finally come to an end. The next day, Victoria returned to the Ashworth Corporation. In the very first morning meeting, she moved swiftly to make an example of certain employees, a clear act of killing the chicken to scare the monkeys. With ruthless efficiency, she summarily fired 3 staff members who had been amongst the most vocal in mocking Ethan Shaw after the Gala incident. 2 of those fired were known to be my loyalists within her company. I wasn't particularly surprised by Victoria's blatant, unapologetic defense of Ethan. After all, judging by the photographic evidence, they were presumably sharing the same bed now. What did genuinely surprise me, however, was that she had the audacity to bring Ethan along with her to the intimate family dinner at her parents' house that evening. Ethan, it seemed, had used the business trip not only for pleasure, but also to procure numerous gifts for my mother-in-law, Eleanor, mostly expensive health supplements and wellness products. He had clearly researched her preferences and successfully charmed her with his thoughtful offerings. Eleanor was beaming. When I arrived, Eleanor greeted me warmly, asking someone to fetch Arthur and Victoria, who were apparently talking in the study so that dinner could begin. She took my hand affectionately and began chattering about various inconsequential family matters. Victoria eventually emerged from the study and entered the dining room. She shot me a single brief glance, then deliberately averted her eyes. Ethan followed closely behind her and, with astonishing boldness, proceeded to sit down right beside her in the very seat that I traditionally occupied during these family dinners. Victoria paused for a barely perceptible second, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she didn't object or ask him to move. Considering we weren't officially divorced yet, still legally husband and wife, her allowing this male assistant, her subordinate, to accompany her to her family home and usurp my customary place at the table was an undeniable, calculated slap in the face. Ethan's smug, triumphant satisfaction was plainly visible on his face. The sheer absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh out loud. Eleanor, ever the peacemaker, gently patted the empty seat next to her on the other side. "Come, Sincere, sit here next to me," she said, her expression kind and welcoming. "We made your absolute favorite seafood feast today. You must try some. It's exceptionally fresh and delicious. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Ashworth, had been my late mother's dearest friend, and she had always treated me with genuine warmth and affection." Thinking about the difficult words I was about to utter, a sharp pang of sadness twisted inside me. But I felt I had no other choice. Swallowing such blatant insults and disrespect simply wasn't in my nature. I gently squeezed Eleanor's hand where it rested on mine and patted the back of it reassuringly. "Mom," I began, my voice quiet but firm, "I actually won't be staying for dinner tonight. I came because there's something very important I need to announce." Eleanor's warm smile instantly froze on her face. "Own sincere?" she asked, a note of apprehension creeping into her voice. "I can't, whatever it is, wait until after we've eaten?" I shook my head slowly, then turned my gaze directly towards Victoria, finally voicing the words that had been churning inside me for days. "Dad," I addressed Arthur Ashworth, then looked at Eleanor. "Mom, I want a divorce from Victoria." As the final word left my lips, an absolute profound silence descended upon the dining room. Even the rich, savory aroma of the seafood feast hanging in the air suddenly felt heavy and oppressive. My father-in-law, Arthur Ashworth, stared at me, his face etched with disbelief. "Sincere," he said gravely. "Divorce isn't some trivial matter, especially not for you and Victoria. The complexities, the implications, they are enormous." "Any's sincere," Eleanor chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. "Haven't you two always gotten along so wonderfully? Why is this happening? What could possibly have gone so wrong?" Victoria slammed her hand down hard on the table and shot to her feet, her carefully maintained cold facade finally cracking, revealing the raw emotion beneath. "Sincere Sterling, have you quite finished making trouble?" she demanded furiously. "Or just because I gave Ethan one suit, you've dragged out this petty grudge for weeks, and now you want a divorce over it? Have you not reflected on your own actions, your own contributions to this situation, even once during all this time?" Arthur slammed his fist down on the table with much greater force, silencing her instantly. "You be quiet," he commanded sharply. He turned his stern gaze back to me. "Sincere, you tell us what's going on." "Victoria," I said, my voice devoid of emotion now. "Enine was initially planning to allow you to retain some measure of dignity through this process. However, since you clearly refuse that courtesy, don't blame me for being blunt." I reached into my inner jacket pocket and retrieved the manila envelope Harry had given me earlier. I tossed the stack of incriminating photos and the small USB drive onto the center of the dining table. "Mom, Dad," I said grimly, "see for yourselves." Victoria lunged forward and snatched the photos, her face instantly turning a ghastly shade of livid green. Her hand trembled violently, causing the photos to scatter across the polished floor, revealing the explicit, compromising images of her and Ethan Shaw together in bed. Eleanor picked up one of the photos with trembling hands, her eyes immediately filling with tears and welling up with horrified disbelief. "Victoria," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. What is the meaning of this?" Arthur frowned deeply, his gaze sharp as a razor as he stared intently at Victoria, silently demanding an explanation. Veins pulsed visibly on Victoria's forehead, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "Sincere Sterling, she spat my name like a curse. I loved you, I respected you, and this is how you repay me. You fabricate these disgusting fake photos just to slander me and ruin my reputation." Her voice rose hysterically. "Are you really willing to throw away all these years of our relationship, everything we built together? Do you truly want to divorce me that badly?" I couldn't help but let out a bitter, incredulous laugh. "Me? Slander you?" I scoffed. "Perhaps the photos can be faked, Victoria, but this memory card contains video footage as well. Would you like us all to watch it together?" My voice hardened. I, Sincere Sterling, have always conducted myself personally and professionally with integrity and transparency. Even if I am determined to divorce you, I would never resort to such despicable, underhanded tactics." Arthur, now trembling with rage himself, slammed his fist repeatedly on the dining table, making the silverware rattle violently. "Victoria," he roared, "once you will provide us with a reasonable, believable explanation for this right now." "Dad," Victoria pleaded desperately, turning to her father. "You know me. You know what kind of person I am. You know I would never." She choked back a sob. Sincere and I have had our disagreements recently, yes. But I would absolutely never do anything to betray him like this. Suddenly, as if a crucial memory clicked into place, Victoria whirled around to face Ethan Shaw, who was huddled miserably against the far wall, trying to shrink into the shadows. She pointed a trembling finger at the damning photos scattered on the floor, her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits, her voice low and menacing, each word squeezed out from between clenched teeth. These photographs. What exactly is the meaning of this? Explain yourself, she demanded. We clearly did nothing of the sort, so why do photographs like this even exist? Ethan's face was deathly pale, his entire body trembling visibly as he reluctantly pushed himself away from the wall and stood uncertainly. He looked at Victoria, his expression a mixture of terror and frantic desperation. I don't know, Ms. Ashworth, he stammered, his voice barely audible. Please, you have to believe me. I honestly truly don't know how Mr. Sterling came to possess these photographs. Victoria's eyes widened further in disbelief, her fury reaching a boiling point. With a sudden violent movement, she kicked over a nearby dining chair, sending it clattering across the floor. She advanced menacingly on Ethan, step by deliberate step, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. What precisely do you mean by that? She hissed. Are you implying that these photos depict something that actually happened? Her voice rose again, sharp with outrage. Why don't I have any memory of it? Ethan stumbled backward frantically until his back hit the cold, unyielding wall. Tears welled in his eyes, threatening to spill over, his voice choked with fear and desperation. Ms. Ashworth, please don't look at me like that. I'm scared, he whimpered. All I remember from that day, you were quite drunk. We were watching the sunset from the hotel terrace. And suddenly you seemed to mistake me. He darted a tearful, fearful glance in my direction, then quickly looked down at the floor again. You mistook me for Mr. Sterling. You held on to me tightly, kept calling Mr. Sterling's name. And then what? Victoria demanded sharply. Speak, tell me what happened next. Sana tried. I really tried to push you away, Ethan sobbed. But you wouldn't let go. He shook his head violently, burying his face in his hands. And I don't know, I swear, I don't know how Mr. Sterling found out about any of this, Miss Ashworth, please, you must believe me, I honestly intended to keep this secret buried in my heart forever. Victoria's expression went completely blank for a long moment, then twisted into a bitter, disbelieving grimace. She shook her head slowly. Impossible, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. How could I possibly not know what I myself did or didn't do? She looked directly at Ethan, her voice filled with cold certainty. Perhaps in a drunken haze I momentarily mistook you for Sincere. But I would never, under any circumstances, actually sleep with you. Her lip curled in disdain. Because you are simply not worthy. Victoria's scathing words seemed to cut Ethan to the core. The tears he had been holding back finally spilled over, streaming down his pale cheeks. Looking utterly humiliated and profoundly wounded, he clenched his jaw tightly, turned, and fled from the dining room. Only then did Victoria slowly turn back to face me, her expression filled with infinite sadness and desperation. Sincere, she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. And please believe me. I didn't. I swear to you. I did not do anything to betray you. I looked back at her, my face an impassive mask, my heart numb. Whether you actually did or not, I replied coldly. At this point, I honestly don't care. We are getting divorced regardless. No, Victoria cried out, her voice raw with anguish. And I don't agree. I will not agree to this. She rushed towards me, grabbing my hand desperately, her grip surprisingly strong. Sincere, you know how much I love you, you have to know that. Her eyes searched mine frantically. Why do you think I made exceptions for Ethan? Why was I different with him? Isn't it obvious? It's because in his eyes, in his features, I saw a faint reflection of your younger self, she confessed, her voice cracking. But even if he resembles you somewhat, I assure you, I never did anything improper, and I certainly would never physically touch him in that way. Please believe me. Her voice trailed off into a choked sob. I had heard enough. I didn't want to listen to any more of her convoluted excuses or justifications. I raised a hand sharply, cutting her off mid-sentence. But he is still not me, I stated flatly. Don't dare use me as a pretext for your apparent infatuation, only to try and shift the blame onto my shoulders in the end. My voice remained level but held an edge of steel. I don't doubt that you once loved me deeply, Victoria, but I am 30 years old now. I admit I am no longer as young, perhaps not as attractive, and certainly not as obedient as a boy barely out of his teens. I am assertive, sometimes domineering, admittedly not as gentle or considerate as others might be. I paused, letting the harsh truth hang in the air. Admit it, Victoria. Right now, in this moment, you don't love me nearly as much as you desperately try to convince yourself you do. It's merely the weight of responsibility, the constraints and expectations of our marriage, forcing you to continue playing the role of the loving wife. My voice softened slightly, but my resolve remained firm. Since the original feelings, the core foundation, are clearly gone, why continue forcing something that is broken? Let's release each other. Let's go our separate ways and find our own paths. I spoke each sentence calmly, deliberately, but with every word Victoria's face grew colder, harder. She stared straight into my eyes, seemingly searching for any flicker of doubt, any hint of deception, any sign that our relationship could still be salvaged. But my gaze remained steady, clear, and utterly unwavering. Her grip on my hand tightened painfully, her voice dropping to an almost desperate plea. Sincere, that's just your interpretation, your judgment. It doesn't represent how I truly feel, please. I'm begging you. Don't treat divorce so lightly. Don't make this kind of cruel joke. Her eyes implored me. I can explain everything that has happened recently. Truly, I can. She launched into another rapid-fire explanation. I didn't initially want to take him on that business trip. He begged me, literally crying, terrified that he would be relentlessly bullied and tormented at the company if I left him behind. She rushed on, and all those entertainment activities he enjoyed, the skydiving, the scuba diving, those were all provided and arranged by our business partners. I wasn't even involved in most of them. Well, let's just say I was. Completely in the wrong this time, she conceded finally, her voice laced with desperation. I apologize to you sincerely. I am so sorry that I made you feel wronged, hurt, and humiliated. She looked down, then back up, trying a different tactic. But my original intention, honestly, was only to use this trip as a sort of wake-up call, to perhaps make you realize that even a husband needs to grant his wife a degree of personal space and autonomy sometimes. I never ever expected things to spiral so disastrously out of control like this. I frowned slightly, pulling my hand firmly away from her grasp. A cold, humorless sneer touched my lips. Oh, my sincerest apologies, I said sarcastically. And I had no idea my love was causing you such profound suffocation. But don't you worry, Victoria. You'll be free from it soon enough. Then I reached into my briefcase and retrieved the finalized divorce agreement Harry had prepared. I placed it on the table in front of her. When the asset division, I stated calmly, 'tis been structured, to the best of my ability, to be clear, fair, and equitable. Please review it carefully. If the terms are acceptable to you, simply sign the document. I added, as a final concession, if you have specific objections or proposed modifications, I am willing, out of respect for your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth, to discuss them further with you or your legal counsel. Victoria stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake, unable to accept the finality it represented. She let out a choked, defeated, bitter laugh. I will not agree to this divorce, she declared, her voice trembling but defiant. And furthermore, she added fiercely, "and I will find concrete evidence to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that I never touched Ethan Shaw." That's irrelevant now, I replied coolly. "If you refuse to sign, I will simply proceed with filing for divorce through the courts." Victoria's eyes reddened with disbelief and unshed tears. She simply couldn't comprehend it. How could it be possible? When I had clearly loved her so deeply, so demonstrably, and when she, Victoria Ashworth, had humbled herself to the point of apologizing, why was I still so inflexibly, irrevocably insistent on ending their marriage? Before Victoria could articulate any further arguments or pleas, Arthur Ashworth slammed his hand on the table one last time and rose heavily to his feet. He shot Victoria a single look brimming with profound disappointment and palpable anger, then turned and stormed back towards the quiet refuge of his study. Eleanor Ashworth was already sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, her shoulders shaking, tears streaming unchecked through her fingers. "Sincere, Victoria," she choked out between sobs. "How could you two? How could something like this happen to our family? In just 5 short years, the sensational, highly publicized high society union, hailed as the wedding of the century, had crumbled to this devastating end. The sweetness, trust, and partnership that had once defined their relationship had evaporated completely, leaving behind only bitterness, suspicion, and irreparable damage. I observed this heart-wrenching scene with a carefully maintained mask of cold detachment, though a tumultuous mix of conflicting emotions churned deep within me. We had been planning just recently on starting a family this year. I didn't return to the luxurious house I had shared with Victoria. Instead, I drove to my own private villa, a place that held different memories. After my mother passed away several years ago, my father, George Sterling, had retired from active involvement in the corporation and had chosen to live out his golden years there, enjoying a quieter pace of life. I made it a point to visit him every few days. I told my father straightforwardly that I was divorcing Victoria. He was visibly shocked for a long moment, absorbing the news, but ultimately he respected my agency, telling me simply that I had to make my own decisions. However, old habits die hard. Almost immediately after our conversation, he discreetly slipped into his room and placed a clandestine phone call to Arthur Ashworth. In the past, whenever Victoria and I had encountered minor disagreements or rough patches, our fathers would often communicate privately behind the scenes, subtly coordinating their efforts to help us mediate and patch things up. But this time was fundamentally different. Seeing me return home from the office every single evening over the subsequent days, my father quickly grasped the severity and finality of the situation. His usual relaxing routines evaporated. He stopped going for his customary morning bird walks. He ceased enjoying his leisurely afternoon tea. Instead, he seemed to hover around me constantly, persistently reminding me of all the ways Victoria had been kind and thoughtful towards him over the years. Eventually, I grew tired of hearing it. "So was so incredibly good to you, Dad?" I finally retorted, my patience wearing thin. "You've called her numerous times these past couple of days. Has she even bothered to answer your calls once?" My father was rendered speechless, looking at me with a mixture of helplessness and frustration. She must be devastated because you abandoned her," he finally sputtered defensively. "See, she's probably retreated somewhere, hiding away, completely heartbroken." I couldn't help but smile faintly at my father's transparent attempt at deflection. The poor man was so stressed and worried about our situation that he had actually developed visible stress sores on his lips. "Dad," I said gently but firmly, "please stop trying to intervene, both of you. This divorce is happening. It's non-negotiable." I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Oh, please, don't worry. I give you my word. I will ensure this situation does not negatively impact the long-standing friendship and mutual respect between you and Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth." My father looked at me intently, his brow furrowed. "On you loved Victoria so deeply, sincere," he said quietly. "Don't you feel any regret? Aren't you even a little bit sad about losing her?" I clapped him gently on the shoulder again. "Dad," I replied, my voice deliberately toneless, "once the divorce is finalized, I intend to treat her as if she's dead." After the customary mourning period, I adapted the concept slightly, and I expect I'll forget her soon enough. My father's lips moved as if he wanted to argue further, perhaps to express his dismay at my callousness, but ultimately he said nothing more. He turned and walked slowly away, muttering under his breath, "Sigh. I sometimes wonder if raising you to be so exceptionally capable and fiercely independent was truly a good thing or not. Being the master of one's own destiny?" I thought silently. Of course it's a good thing. The reason Victoria wasn't answering Dad's calls, as I soon learned, was because she had entrusted her phone to highly skilled tech experts, tasking them with tracing the origin of those damning photos and video. Furthermore, her own investigative team had flown immediately to the city where she had been on that fateful business trip, specifically to scrutinize the hotel and gather any available evidence. They had already been gone for 3 days. This valuable intelligence came courtesy of Harry, who had been diligently fulfilling his delegated task. He visited the Ashworth Corporation headquarters every single day on my behalf, persistently attempting to get Victoria to sign the divorce agreement he carried. Harry also confirmed another piece of information. Since that disastrous family dinner, Ethan Shaw had completely vanished. He hadn't shown his face at Ashworth Corp again. On the 5th day of Victoria's self-imposed disappearance and communication blackout, I received a video message on my phone from an unknown number. At first glance, the video displayed a large, open-air rooftop terrace. The footage appeared to have been shot from a considerable distance, likely from a building directly opposite the terrace. The distinctive orange-hued background, illuminated by the setting sun, looked disturbingly familiar. Before I could even decide whether to watch the video, the same unknown number initiated a call. I answered. The voice on the other end was Victoria's. She sounded breathless, her voice filled with undisguised excitement and vindication. "Sincere, I told you I never touched Ethan Shaw," she exclaimed triumphantly. And I managed to track down the exact hotel we stayed at. Unfortunately, the security camera covering that specific rooftop terrace on that particular day had been maliciously damaged, rendered useless. She continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. On it took an enormous amount of effort, sincere, digging, and searching. But I finally located a photography enthusiast who happened to capture footage of the terrace from his apartment across the way that evening. I bought the original, unedited video file from him. Her voice hardened slightly. "Those photos in the video clip you were shown, they were entirely fabricated, created by Ethan's cousin using sophisticated AI software. Remember her? That girl with the blue hair? The young woman who had nearly knocked me over outside my office building that day? The one with the bruised eyes and the strange smirk?" "Sincere," Victoria pleaded, her voice softening, losing its triumphant edge and becoming thick with emotion again. "I didn't do anything to betray you." "I swear it. Can we reconsider, not get divorced?" My grip on the phone tightened almost imperceptibly. I consciously pushed thoughts of the blue-haired girl and her possible involvement aside. My fingertip hovered over the video play icon on my screen for a long suspended moment, but ultimately I didn't press it. I didn't need to see it. I spoke calmly, my voice measured and devoid of reciprocal emotion. "Victoria," I began quietly, "does betrayal only count in your book if you are literally caught in the act? Flagrante delicto?" I paused, letting the question hang. "Even assuming this new video definitively proves your innocence regarding that specific physical act, what practical difference does it truly make at this point?" My voice remained level as I continued, methodically listing her transgressions, the wounds she had inflicted. "When you deliberately gave the custom suit I had ordered for myself to Ethan Shaw, Did you pause for even a second to consider how that might make me feel? The disrespect it implied? But when you abandoned me, your husband drunk on the side of the road, choosing instead to rush off and rescue him from a minor inconvenience. Did you think at all about the public humiliation I would endure? When you took him on that extended business trip, and tacitly allowed him to flood social media with posts deliberately crafted to look like a romantic honeymoon getaway? Did you consider the damaging gossip and speculation I would inevitably face amongst our colleagues and peers? And you even brought him into your family home, allowed him to brazenly occupy my traditional place at the dinner table. You rationalized it later as some sort of misguided attempt to teach me a lesson or give me a wake-up call. To me, Victoria, it felt less like a lesson and more like the ultimate calculated act of profound humiliation. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, sincere," Victoria finally whispered, her voice thick with suppressed sobs, barely audible. "I know. I realize now that no matter how I try to explain or justify my actions, I cannot erase the deep hurt I have caused you." Her voice cracked. "And I admit the way I handled everything. It was incredibly selfish and unbelievably foolish. I completely disregarded your feelings, your perspective." She took a shaky breath. "But please, sincere, you have to believe me. I never ever intended to truly hurt you, and I most certainly never wanted to end our marriage." Listening to her belated confession, her expressions of remorse, I felt nothing. A chilling emptiness. Wounds eventually heal, yes, but the scars always remain, permanent reminders of the injury. There was simply no way for us to go back to what we once were. After Victoria returned, she continued to stall, persistently refusing to sign the divorce papers despite her apologies and newfound evidence. Harry, ever persistent, escalated his tactics. He practically moved into the private lounge area connected to her executive office suite. When he was hungry, he brazenly helped himself to the meals delivered for her. When he felt tired, he unceremoniously crashed on the sofa bed in her lounge. Periodically, he would call me to share the latest office gossip and updates on his siege. "And you won't believe this, sincere," he reported one afternoon, sounding amused. "The police actually came to Ashworth Corp today. Never thought someone as sharp and untouchable as you could be so thoroughly schemed against by a couple of amateurs." He chuckled grimly. "Turns out, Ethan Shaw's cousin Chloe has been arrested. Seems she confessed to everything. Unfortunately, Ethan himself managed to slip away, still on the run." Harry then proceeded to relay the full sordid story as pieced together by the police investigation and Chloe's confession. That infamous Dior suit? That was apparently Ethan's initial gambit, a way to test Victoria's boundaries and gauge how far she might bend the rules for him. It turned out that when Victoria had first interviewed Ethan, despite his merely average qualifications, she had subtly hinted to the Human Resources Department that he should be hired. Ethan, apparently, had developed an instant crush on Victoria, a classic case of infatuation at first sight. For the initial 6 months, he had played the part of the diligent, careful assistant, meticulously performing his duties. He had heard the rumors about Victoria's dual nature, warm and approachable in her personal life, but exceptionally strict and demanding in her professional sphere, known for her policy of clear rewards and harsh punishments, where even a minor mistake could result in demotion back to the entry level. However, when he had accidentally spilled tea on crucial documents or mistakenly prepared the wrong PowerPoint presentation for a major meeting, this supposedly formidable female CEO hadn't reprimanded him at all. Instead, she had comforted him gently, reassuringly telling him just to be more careful next time. It wasn't until Ethan first encountered me, Victoria's actual husband, the legitimate power figure in her life, that he finally understood the reason for her unusual leniency towards him, his perceived resemblance to my younger self. From that point forward, his infatuation curdled into resentment and hostility directed squarely at me. Later, his cousin, Chloe Shaw, the blue-haired girl, came to him desperate for money, having accumulated significant gambling debts. Upon learning about Victoria's immense wealth and status, Chloe had actively encouraged Ethan to leverage his youth and Victoria's apparent soft spot for him to seduce her and secure a permanent position of power and influence. Chloe, naturally, envisioned herself reaping the benefits, enjoying a life of reflected luxury. Believing, perhaps correctly, that Victoria harbored some degree of special feeling for him, however misplaced, Ethan decided to test the waters with the Dior suit incident. Victoria making such a significant exception for him fueled his hopes and emboldened him. On the night of the gala, he used the pretext of needing help returning the suit to once again successfully pull Victoria away from my side. However, Victoria merely assisted him with the return process at the boutique, and then, adding insult to injury from Ethan's perspective, she immediately proceeded to pre-order 2 suits from the next season's collection for me. Ethan's flickering hopes were instantly extinguished. He realized then that he needed a more drastic approach, something that would actively drive a wedge between Victoria and me, fostering genuine resentment on her part. This led directly to the incident the following day orchestrated by Chloe, the accidental collision, the spilled coffee, her theatrical kneeling and begging for forgiveness, all staged for Victoria's benefit. Designed to portray me as callous and arrogant, Chloe, however, was impatient, desperate to get her hands on money quickly to pay off her pressing gambling debts. She and Ethan then conspired during the business trip, planning to drug Victoria at the hotel. Their goal was to engineer a situation where Ethan could take advantage of her compromised state, thereby creating a fait accompli and irreversible situation that would force Victoria's hand, perhaps leading to a pregnancy or a scandal that would compel me to divorce her, thus clearing the path for Ethan. Unexpectedly, even under the influence of the drug, Victoria managed to cling to a final shred of clarity and consciousness, forcefully pushing Ethan away before he could fully enact his plan. Thwarted in their primary objective, Chloe then resorted to Plan B, creating the sophisticated fake photos and video using AI software. Their intention was to present this evidence to me, hoping it would provoke me into initiating the divorce myself, effectively doing Ethan's dirty work for him. This explained why, when I confronted Victoria with the photos at the family dinner, Ethan had delivered that specific, carefully worded, misleading confession. Thankfully, Victoria's inherent strength and persistence had driven her to investigate thoroughly, ultimately uncovering the entire convoluted truth. Chloe Shaw was subsequently arrested and faced multiple serious charges, including illegal gambling, extortion, theft, conspiracy, and endangering another person's safety through drugging. Ethan Shaw, however, remained elusive, a fugitive from justice. Hearing the full sordid tale, I couldn't help but let out a weary sigh. If only Victoria had remained true to her former self, navigating the inevitable temptations of life with grace and detachment, never allowing herself to become entangled. Could anyone, even someone as manipulative as Ethan, have possibly succeeded in scheming against us and destroying our marriage? I spent some time abroad, focusing on international business collaborations and further studies. When I returned to the country 3 months later, I was greeted with shocking news. Victoria Ashworth had been involved in a devastating car accident. Both of her legs had been severely crushed in the collision. The prognosis was grim. She would likely spend the rest of her life confined to a wheelchair. The driver responsible for the crash, the perpetrator, was none other than Ethan Shaw. He was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 25 years in prison for intentional assault causing grievous bodily harm. I found it difficult to comprehend. Didn't he profess to be deeply infatuated with Victoria? Was his motive truly the twisted logic of, if I can't have her, then no one can? A desire to destroy the object of his thwarted obsession. The truth, when it emerged, was even more chilling. When I arrived back at my villa, I noticed immediately that my black Maybach, my absolute favorite car, was missing from the secure underground garage. It took considerable persistent questioning before my father finally, reluctantly, revealed the truth. Victoria, anticipating my reaction, had begged him to keep the details from me. The black Maybach was more than just a car to me. I cherished it, ensuring it received meticulous maintenance every single month. During my time abroad, Victoria, knowing how much the car meant to me, had kindly taken upon herself the task of driving it to the dealership for its scheduled servicing. Ethan Shaw, entirely unaware that I was out of the country, had apparently been staking out my villa relentlessly for over a month, waiting for an opportunity. When he finally saw my distinctive black Maybach pulling out of the driveway driven, unbeknownst to him, by Victoria, he acted decisively. He had rented a nondescript, used car specifically for this purpose. Flooring the accelerator, he rammed the rented vehicle into the Maybach with full force, and without the slightest hesitation. His motive, it turned out, wasn't frustrated love, but pure, unadulterated vengeance. After his and Chloe's elaborate scheme was exposed, Ethan found himself utterly ostracized. His family and friends had severed all ties. He was subjected to constant ridicule and contempt from former colleagues. He was effectively blacklisted from the entire industry, his future prospects destroyed. Unable to cope with this catastrophic fall from grace, he had twisted the narrative in his own mind, blaming his entire misfortune, all his suffering squarely on me, the person he had intended to kill that day. The target of his murderous rage had always been sincere Sterling. Victoria had simply been in the wrong place, driving the wrong car, at the tragically wrong time. The day after my return to the country, I went to the hospital, carrying a basket of tasteful flowers. Victoria was recuperating in a private, very important person room in the main inpatient ward. Strict instructions were posted. Absolutely no visitors allowed, except for essential medical personnel. I stood outside the closed door for a long moment and gently knocked. From within, I heard Victoria's voice, surprisingly calm yet underscored with a deep, weary strain. "Leave me alone," she said flatly. "Victoria," I replied quietly, "it's me, Sincere." An extended silence hung heavy in the air, the closed door a physical barrier mirroring the vast emotional chasm that now separated us. Neither of us spoke further. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door opened slightly, and a nurse emerged. She handed me 2 folded documents, clearly instructed by Victoria. One was the divorce agreement I had presented weeks ago. It now bore Victoria Ashworth's signature. The other document was a share transfer agreement. In it, Victoria was attempting to unconditionally hand over her controlling shares, effectively gifting me the entire Ashworth Corporation. Later, I met with Victoria's designated legal representative, and we finalized the divorce proceedings officially. However, I couldn't bring myself to accept the Ashworth Corporation shares. My father, upon learning of Victoria's offer, had stated unequivocally that if I dared to accept her company, he would personally break both my legs. A year passed. Eventually, I encountered Victoria again. She had been fitted with advanced prosthetic legs and was learning to walk with them. Remarkably, demonstrating incredible resilience, she had already made her return to the demanding world of business, and we, the couple once celebrated as the merger of 2 dynasties, we became the closest of strangers. The end.